Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Waypoint. Today we are playing Grid 2 for the first time for me. I had literally never played this game until today, despite having played every other game in the series. Thankfully I have owned it since 2018, so I was able to go back and play this game because it is no longer on sale, which is something we discussed last week when we played the first Grid game. Something I did run into in this game, however, is the fact that I only own the basic edition of this game and none of the DLC, and when selecting my car for these races I was looking through a bunch of them. I was like, oh, I'll race the Skyline, why not? I'll choose the Nissan Skyline, please. One Nissan Skyline, sir, I'll take it. And then the game was like, nuh-uh, that's DLC, wanna buy it? I was like, can't buy it. The car's in the game, I'm looking at the car model, it's just not letting me race as it because I don't own the license for it, and I will never be able to use that car. That's cool. Again, this isn't news. We know this is how old racing games work, but it was a topic of conversation last week and I didn't really touch on DLC, so it's lame that I will forever own an incomplete version of this game. But hey, that's just what it is. I'm sure I'll live. But yeah, Grid 2 might as well be called Grid at Night because it's obsessed with nighttime tracks, this course. I chose the basic default ass custom championship track selection, and it's mostly comprised of night tracks. Or I guess I should say tracks which are set to nighttime because you can change that. I did set up a custom championship with tracks which I thought might be fun. I spent ages tweaking settings and going, oh, we'll have this one at daytime, we'll have this one at nighttime, we'll have street tracks interspersed with like more traditional race tracks like Brands Hatch and stuff. And then I finished one race and the game crashed, so Grid 2 might have some compatibility issues nowadays too. But yeah, Grid 2 at Night is... I'm going to stop that bit now. It's probably the most arcadey feeling Grid title out of them all, to the point where I was racing around Yas Marina circuit and kind of going, this doesn't really work with this game's handling. When the cars race like Need for Speed cars and... or I guess I should clarify because there's a lot of Need for Speed games, as we've discovered. Need for Speed Underground cars, and you're racing around this circuit with tight corners, and turning is more about drifting and trying to keep control of your drift than it is about, you know, slowing down and taking the corner sensibly like it would be in more of a Simcade game. Then yeah, it doesn't really work. It just kind of feels like I'm playing a cartoon version of the circuit, if that makes any sense. It's not bad by any means though. It's still a fun racing game. I set the AI to hard, and unlike hard AI in Grid Legends, I actually had a fairly difficult time trying to keep up with them, as you can see throughout the duration of this video. Although, as you will also see throughout the duration of this video, that's also because I was trying to keep a handle on my handling. Maybe it's just because I was driving the Honda NSX-R, but paranoid I got that wrong now. The Honda NSX of some variety. But, yeah, it was a little hard to control. But I can totally see myself going back and playing through this game's campaign mode. I also had a sniff around in the online mode, and while there's no online lobbies available, it did seem like online was still up and running and functioning just like in the original Grid. Although I said that last week, and then I went back and tried to do another time trial and it said there was, you know, no connecting to the servers or whatever, so maybe it's up, it's just spotty. But I am very thankful that I own this game and I am able to download it and play it and see what it was like and play through the campaign mode if I would like to. A little like the first game, it definitely feels like it is of an era. I mean, when I opened the game I had to do like a little race to get started, and the guy was like, wow, everyone was recording you on their camera phones, and I was like, okay, camera phones, huh? We're still using the term camera phones. It's a little interesting to note, Grid 2 came out 5 years after the original game, so it's gonna feel a little bit different because there's a fairly decent chunk of time between the two titles. But I think one of the weirdest parts of that is that this very much feels like a direct sequel to the original game, despite maybe feeling a little more arcadey. Whereas just 1 year later Grid Autosport would come out, which feels like a completely different game to Grid 2. I think Grid as a series in general is just really interesting to look over. It feels like it has a bit of an identity crisis. Every game has its own kind of unique thing to it, and not really in a way that's just there to be the unique thing to it, but more like they keep switching up directions as to what they actually want to do with the franchise. But I think that results in us having a really varied series where we can go and play different grids for different reasons. So I think actually we got something pretty great out of that. As I touched upon earlier, the handling in this game to me is kind of reminiscent of Need for Speed Underground. Maybe it's been too long since I played Need for Speed Underground, I don't know, maybe it's very different, but it maybe I'm just latching on to the whole at night aspect of this game. But yeah, it reminded me more of like some PS2 racing games in terms of just how it felt, and I appreciate that. I think there is room for that in racing games, and even if it then feels a little goofy to be racing on actual real race circuits with this kind of racing, I think it's also pretty cool that it exists. I think that's all I've really got to say about Grid 2 for the moment. It's not my favourite entry in the series, although I haven't really given it too much of a chance yet, but just from first impressions. It's not my favourite, but I'm very glad I have it, and I might play more of it. Moving lethargically on then to what I've been playing this week beyond Grid, I guess I should mention first and foremost, even though it isn't the quote-unquote headline title, I don't know why I think of things this way, but while we're still in the area, I finished the Grid Legends main story this week, and I'll have more to say on it when we do the Grid Legends episode a few weeks from now. But this is just to say I had a pretty good time playing through the story. I think I mentioned it last week. It's surprising that we have like a story-focused racing game in, well, I guess 2022 is when it came out. And it's not cringe, it's actually fairly enjoyable, if a bit predictable. And it definitely inspired me to keep playing through the story mode and see it through to its end. I also have the DLC story packs to go through as well, which I haven't started yet, but I also really just want to get started on the traditional career mode and see if that can hold my attention the same way that the story mode did. But yeah, I haven't really touched Grid Legends since finishing the story mode, but I should, because it's a fun racing game. As kind of a tangent, a side tangent, it's funny watching that Umamusume game, if that's how you pronounce it, gain traction, which, if you are unaware, perhaps blissfully, it's this gacha game where horse girls are running around horse racing tracks, and you can train them and try and collect ones with better stats and race them to see who wins, and so on and so forth. I have a very bare bones understanding of what it actually is, but that's what I know about it. And it's interesting because this extreme popularity of this game has prompted people to get interested in actual horse racing. And I kind of look at that and I go, I think my version of that is Formula 1 and just racing in general with like cars instead of horses. I talked about it on the Weekly Waypoint at the time, but at some point last year I got a little interested in Formula 1 and picked up a Formula 1 TV sub, but instead of getting into modern Formula 1, I got distracted by their documentaries of old championships from the 60s, and that was fascinating to go back and watch. And honestly, I'm kind of tempted to go back and pick up that little exercise again. I don't know why I'm calling it an exercise. I looked up the Formula 1 2025 game, and I've put it on my wish list in case it goes on deep discount someday. And this is one of those moments where I go, it's kind of a shame I don't have Game Pass, because I could have tried it on there, but whatever. I did try a Formula 1 racing game on Game Pass once before, and it felt so unintuitive and sim heavy that it drew me away from it. But I feel like Codemasters, right? They're the same people who make Grid. I've heard that the Grid series is kind of dead. I wonder if maybe some of their devs might be making Formula 1 games now, and maybe they might be slightly more approachable because of that. That is just something I have made up in my mind that might be the case. They probably just laid them off, let's be real. But we'll see. I might still become a Formula 1 boy in the future. We'll see what happens. Maybe they should make a anime girl racing game where the characters are based on Formula 1 cars and drivers. That's what it needed all along. It's funny because my dad started watching horse racing again for the first time in many, many years recently, and I'm like, do do you know about Umamusume? Like, it's like, no. And I explained what it was, and he was like, what? I was like, so why did you start watching horse racing again? And he was like, oh, it's just started being broadcast again on channels that we have. I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's a byproduct of it becoming, you know, suddenly more people are interested in it and they're trying to make it more accessible to more people. I don't know. It's really interesting to see the knock-on effects of different kinds of audiences in different kinds of media, but that's bit tinfoil hat. It could just be a coincidence. I don't know how I feel about horse racing myself. I don't know enough about it. My brain goes, that seems unethical, but then apparently it's not, and horses get treated really well. But I don't know, shrug. Uninformed on that one. Headline game. This week, I stepped back into the world of Guild Wars 2. Let me catch you up on my history with Guild Wars 2 really quickly. A couple of years ago, I tried out Guild Wars 2 for the first time, and I played through most of the vanilla story, and then I hit a problem, where the longer a personal story instance was, the more likely I'd encounter a apparently very rare and unfixable bug, where I would get frozen after cutscenes and then get booted from the instance by a disconnect and have to do it all again. And so I was unable to continue. And then last year I figured out a workaround, which was to install a free VPN, which for some reason fixes that problem when I'm connected via VPN. And I got to the start of Heart of Thorns, and yes, I played through all of Living World Season 1 and 2 as well, and I kind of putted out there. Well, I finally picked up the game again, and I finished Heart of Thorns. I am fully invested again. I am fully enraptured by Guild Wars 2 and all of the weird, unique, quirky bits of game design it has and how it does things. If I told you that the first Guild Wars 2 expansion introduces a glider, the ability to open a glider when you jump and hold, or you press jump again, and you can glide around a place, you'd be like, okay, wait, that's the main feature? That's the main gameplay changing feature? Yes. And you know what? It's amazing. Okay, amazing might be a bit of an oversell, but it's really cool because basically in Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns they introduce masteries, which are, instead of leveling up an extra 10 levels, you are leveling up these various perks through these various mastery trees, which give you various unlocks, such as different ways to use your glider through, like, you know, boosts in the air to make you go higher, or the ability to lean and tilt and stuff like that, or like kind of more like a reputation with various tribes so that you can access their merchants and use their shortcuts to traverse to unique areas in the map and stuff like that. I love the mastery system. It appeals to some primal completionist part of me. I know I cited reputations there. It is far more engaging than reputations in WoW, trust me. And this is something I've been praising Guild Wars 2 for the entire time, but in Heart of Thorns they really step it up. Just open world exploration being a core part of the gameplay. There are parts of the story where they say, hey, just go away, do some zone completion, go explore, earn mastery XP, I guess, and come back to us when you've unlocked like your specific mastery point for this thing. And in any other MMO, I would rail against that. I would say that is the worst game design, that is horrible, that is maybe not time gating, but it is killing the pacing, etc, etc. No, it's perfect. In Guild Wars 2, it's perfect because zone exploration is so fulfilling and enjoyable, and it really helps you gain a sense of setting. And with the kind of event train system and the meta map event system, the story's kind of unfolding around you as you're exploring as well. It's not all just in personal story instances. And in fact, there have been times when I've had the ability to progress the story through a personal story instance for some time, but I just keep getting distracted by just one more event. I just want to see what's going on over here. I just want to grab that viewpoint over there. I want to figure out how to get here. And one thing I keep praising Guild Wars 2 for is remembering to be a video game above all else. There are so many other MMORPGs out there which want you to have like this immersive narrative fantasy experience, but they sometimes do so at the detriment of gameplay itself. But there was a moment where I found my way up to a high point in the first Heart of Thorns map, and there was a 10 hero points location below me, and I was like, I don't know how to get there. And then I looked off the edge of a beyond me, and I realized I could jump off it and free fall for a while until I saw a little opening in the cliff face below, open my glider and land on it and claim the points. And that sounds quite simple, but that is such like a video game ass thing of finding like this little secret location and being rewarded for it with points that you can use to upgrade your character. Maybe this is just the platformer in me, right? I grew up playing platforming games first and foremost, like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, but other MMOs don't offer that kind of exploratory experience. Like Guild Wars 2 literally has jumping puzzles as like these places in the world that they have like weekly missions for you to go and do. You don't have to do them as part of a weekly mission structure, you can just do them yourself for fun. But like they know, they've played World of Warcraft, they've seen people jumping around Goldshire to try and climb on top of an inn, and how that's kind of challenging and a fun little accidental part of the game that wasn't programmed to be in there, but you know, is part of the fun anyway. And they said, oh well, we'll just do that ourselves and make it an actual part of the game. Guild Wars 2 is fantastic, and I'm really excited to be back in here. The world's fascinating, I love exploring it, I love learning about the lore. I'm still very new, there's still so much I don't know about this game. And hey, it's probably what I'm going to be playing most of this week too, instead of going off and finding something else to play like I've been doing every week for the last few months. Guild Wars 2 isn't perfect though, don't get me wrong. The third zone, Tangled Depths, is notorious for being an absolute maze, which is infuriating to try to navigate when you want to get from one objective to the next, and I definitely fell prey to that. For sure. I had some heated words to share about that one with my guild. And narratively, Heart of Thorns did not have the strongest ending either, although the final boss fight was fairly cool. And then the map meta event for Dragon Stands, the 4th Heart of Thorns zone, kind of feels like the real end of the story, or like the final boss of Heart of Thorns story, if you know what I mean. So I'm glad that someone told me to go do that. But yeah, Guild Wars 2 announced Visions of Eternity this week, and so I figure I've still got some catching up to do before I can be current with that, and I'm enjoying every second, unless those seconds took place in Tangled Depths. Oh, also, the free VPN I was using decided to not be free anymore, so I no longer have a workaround for the cutscene disconnect bug. And it did happen again during the final story instance of Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns. However, they finally implemented a checkpoint system, and so I was able to just get back in there and continue, and I'm hoping that now that I've hit that point, I'm not going to have that issue again unless I decide to replay earlier story missions. I am kind of toying with actually just finally getting a VPN though, like a subscription one. Just because a lot of DC shows don't seem to be streaming anywhere in the UK, and it's really frustrating. And that would appear to be one solution for two problems at least, so maybe, I don't know. I've also been continuing to play World of Warcraft this week. I've been continuing to make good use of that collector's bounty buff. I finally got invincible after many attempts. I guess you'll see that in an upcoming video. So I'm glad I finally got invincible. I'm still trying for the Smouldering Egg of Milgazor, the Ragnaros mount drop. And I've been listening to the War of the Worlds while doing it, because I decided to take a quick Brandon Sanderson break before diving into the Stormlight archive. And I've been making my way through his Cosmere project a lot faster than I was expecting to, so I feel like I've got time to just kind of like, you know, take a little aside, make sure that I'm not oversaturating my mind with Sanderson. I will say, the only problem with being like, I want to read these really old famous science fiction novels and get up to date with my classics, is sometimes you accidentally look at an author's Wikipedia page and realize they have incredibly upsetting political opinions, or at least they did, and you go, how do I feel about continuing to read War of the Worlds now? Can I put the art before the artist when they've been dead for decades? Probably. I'm not exactly helping helping them, am I? I don't know. As always, that's just my own personal moral conundrum, and I would not impose my values upon anyone else in regards to you should or should not interact with that media. But War of the Worlds kind of slaps, if I'm honest. We listened to the musical version in primary school when I was a kid. I remember that. But I've never actually read the original novel before, and I'm having a lot of fun kind of, you know, from a historical point of view. It's not just like this really cool disaster epic. It's a disaster epic that was written at the end of the 19th century, and it's really fun to be like, oh wow, like, you can tell through the writing that, like, this particular thing was normal, and I had to look up what a dog coach was, and all that kind of thing. It is not a coach pulled by dogs. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I was disappointed too. But yeah, when I finish that, I'll have that blurble of reasoning up on channel 2, Kritigri Talks Stories. But yeah, to get back to what I was talking about earlier, my Brandon Sanderson Cosmere read through, I really am just up to reading the Stormlight Archive and the various secret projects, and a couple of interspersed Stormlight relevant novellas too. And I know that's still a lot of reading, don't get me wrong. I'm probably like halfway through in terms of raw page count. But, you know, I started this fairly late last year, so I was expecting this to be more of a Wheel of Time level project where it took me 3.5 years to get through, but I guess not. Again, follow me over on Kritigri Talk Stories if you want to see my progress through that particular thing. Oh my god, I've just realised I haven't talked about Superman. Okay. That's kind of a... Alright, sorry, I was hemming and hawing over whether to make a specific video for that on a Kritigri Talk Stories channel, but I think I'm just going to talk about it at the end of this weekly waypoint and add the Brands Hatch race, which I crashed out of afterwards, to the end of this video to make it a bit longer to talk about it. Alright, okay, let's go do this real quick. Superman, without spoilers. And the reason I'm not making a full-on Kritigri Talk Stories channel video about it is just because... I don't know, it's been a couple days and the events aren't as fresh in my mind. I should probably have recorded this before, but it's been a fairly busy weekend. But yes, on Saturday night I went and saw Superman with my friends Reese and Molly, and I had such a good time. For reference, the only Superman movies I've seen before this are Man of Steel and I guess Batman v Superman, if you would count that as a Superman movie. And I think I've seen some of the Superman movie before that, which I think was called like Superman Returns or something. I'm more familiar with Superman in the comic book space from DC Comics itself. I read, I think, all of the New 52 Superman and some Action Comics whenever they crossed over and that kind of thing, and I've been reading Rebirth era Superman recently. And my main spoiler-free thought about Superman as a movie is that it takes the spectacle of Man of Steel, which is what I really enjoyed about that movie, and it implants it into an actual Superman movie which embodies what the character of Superman is kind of about. Like, don't get me wrong, Man of Steel is a fantastic movie and that I still love, but having become more familiar with the character of Superman, it's definitely a movie from that weird 2010s era when for a little while we were obsessed with the idea of a darker, grittier Superman and the moral problems with him and stuff. And you can still have the moral problems with Superman in a Superman story, and it doesn't always have to be hopeful and it all turns out alright in the end, don't get me wrong. But the way Man of Steel and that particular Snyderverse did it is a little... I mean, that's a different video in its own right. But this Superman, this movie, David Cornsweet's Superman, definitely felt a lot more true to who Superman is, whilst also having a fairly unique take on the character, which I won't get into for fear of spoilers, but anyone who's seen the movie knows what I'm talking about. It was also quite refreshing to have a supporting cast of heroes who are different to the ones we usually see in movies. And they kind of serve a different role within the story too than you might expect. Is that a take? I will just say that the heroes throughout this entire movie feel a lot more human than they did in the previous DC movies. Although I haven't seen all of the Snyderverse. Anyway, I think that'll do it for my spoiler-free quick little Superman mini review there. I think it's really, really solid and you'll probably have a great time if you go and watch it. And I'm really excited to see what comes next from James Gunn's DC movies. That really is going to do it for now. I've been making some shorts lately, so go check those out if you like. But beyond that, I'll catch you in whatever I make next.